Hello, Tanse, et lanete, ani, bonjour. Welcome back to our shared politics. My name is Nova. I am a settler on Turtle Island. I created this podcast to really showcase socialism instead of just pursuing the Red Scare blindly, which just pushes people further apart. I wish to express acknowledgement that I am on Treaty 8 territory, home to the Tetskane, Deneza, Nahiawak, Soto, and BC Métis. It is essential I recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, both status and non-status, as the guardians of these lands. As a non-Indigenous person, I play a role as a treaty partner being represented by the government. My pronouns are she, her, but I also accept they, them. I fall under the 2S LGBTQIA plus umbrella. And I say these things at the top of every episode so that you are able to make your decision on how safe of a person I am. Okay, so last week I hit a nerve on TikTok when I used my clip talking about Ontario's landlords wanting to use BC's model of tenant eviction and how unpaid rent is just a risk of doing business. Well, that sure brought a lot of wackadoos out of the woodworks to either make assumptions about my personal finances, make comments about my beautiful septum ring, or leave a general hateful word or two. I truly don't think right wingers understand, and frankly, at this point, I don't think they have the capacity to understand that making ad hominem attacks does nothing but prove they have nothing intelligent to say about the policies or issues I'm speaking on. With that said, I'm going to lean into this topic and see who else I can piss off. So, landlords, or as I like to call them, landleeches. They sure as fuck aren't the lords of anything anymore, and all they do is leech off their fellow working class Canadians. These are the petty bourgeoisie that everyone really needs to focus on nowadays. They can admit that there are major flaws and risks with being a land leech, yet instead of doing the bare minimum to help the housing crisis by selling off their extra properties, they instead turn around and blame tenants, or Trudeau, the people who pay their extra mortgage, give them further access to home equity loans or lines of credit, and usually who do the general maintaining of their property instead of letting it go uninhabited and into disrepair. And if we're being perfectly honest here, most tenants go above and beyond what is expected in a lease because most landlords don't even do the bare minimum expected. These include things like living in a townhouse complex, where the exterior of the property is supposed to be maintained by the leech, yet you somehow find yourself out there shoveling snow or cutting grass because all you get are excuses from the property managers and bylaw officers. Or worse yet, having mold in your unit and your land leech not caring. You attempting to go through the correct channels with the residential tenancy branch, and still somehow you're told that you need to pay out of pocket for mold and air quality testing, and if something comes back, we'll figure out some sort of reimbursement. Oh, but make sure you still pay rent on time, or you'll have an eviction notice on your door telling you to get out in 10 days. 10 days in British Columbia. And all that is required is a lapse of rent of 48 hours. Our landlords here don't have to go through our residential tenancy board like they have to in Ontario. So in Ontario, when there's a backlog of the RTB, whatever they've got, whatever their version is, their provincial version, that's where you get tenants who can essentially just squat. And that's where people are really mad about it. Alternatively, you have it here, where landlords don't even have to go through any sort of branch. They can just have a missed payment of rent, which they don't even have to prove, and they can evict you in 10 days. And there's been recently an epidemic of bad landlords in BC who are lying about not being paid rent and are still going on to evict tenants in 10 days. And because it takes longer for us tenants to reach through with the RTB than it does for landlords and everything, we're fucked. You got to pack up and leave in 10 days or the cops can be there to make you leave. So, say that you're on a trip out of town for a long weekend, and it so happens you get home on the 3rd of the month. You will get home to an eviction notice, not even a reminder of rent due, but a literal eviction notice on your door giving you 10 days to pack your shit and leave. If you actually did not have the money, how would you be expected to get $1,000+ in 10 days? Even with a mortgage or a car loan, they give you multiple missed payments before eviction or repo services begin. These are the things going through my head when I say that the RTB is there to keep tenants in line and to cater to Landleeches. There is no organization in British Columbia at this point. I'm not sure if there's any of these organizations anywhere in Canada that actually has the renter in mind. And this isn't just a case of being able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do what your parents or grandparents did. Renters are officially dissaving now, meaning they spend more than they earn. StatsCan shows that renters spent almost 9% more than they earned in 2023, while homeowners comparatively saved 7% of their take-home pay. While renters and homeowners have seen their pays rise at the same pace since the 1990s, the proportion of income renters put towards their housing has grown rapidly in comparison. In 1999, renters put an average of 25% towards housing compared to 23% for homeowners. As of 2022, however, renters are putting almost 30% of their pay towards housing compared with just 20% for homeowners, with that gap being much wider in certain locations, obviously. And on top of that, renters already typically have lower incomes, why they're renting in the first place, limiting their ability to put away savings for a down payment, cutting off their path to homeownership, meaning a threat to renters' path to accumulating wealth, which will do nothing but exacerbate inequality over time. A recent RBC report detailing all of this goes on to argue that renting could become the default for middle and upper income earners if ownership affordability does not improve. Homeownership is now, quote, more likely to be associated with an inheritance or the transfer of wealth, end quote, than based on household income. And on top of all of that, the value of homeowners' real estate has grown 4 times faster than life insurance and pension savings, with home equity increasingly acting as the traditional nest egg to fall back on, which renters are, by and large, being cut out of ever being able to obtain. Now, none of this is accidental in the slightest. This is a business model for for-profit landlords. The private rental market generally refers to individual landlords who own one or a few rental properties. Units owned by these landlords account for roughly 38% of the overall rental market. And StatsCan estimates that those who own multiple units account for nearly a third of total home ownership. Or, as another article put it so well, Canada is a nation of landlords, where over 1 in 6 Canadian homeowners own multiple properties. Or even another article titled, Landlords are one of the leading causes of Canada's rent crisis. Essentially, blame for record high rents, while Canada's homelessness rate increases exponentially, is placed on everything and everyone except where the blame lies, which is with landlords. Ricardo Tranjan, a senior political economist, has written a new book called The Tenant Class. I need to read this book, and here's the quote that sealed the deal for me. The widespread notion of struggling landlords is a grave mischaracterization of the rental market. In fact, Canada's landlord class comprises wealthy families, small businesses, corporations, and financial investors. Rent revenue increases their wealth and political influence, allowing them to extract more income from more tenants, amass more wealth, and do it again. And here's the thing, even if the struggling landlord notion wasn't any way true, then sell your fucking extra property. I don't see why that is so hard for some people to understand. Even if you have to take a loss, you still make some sort of gain from it. What a tenant has to lose is a roof over their heads. They can wind up homeless. You are not the victim here, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord. I am so sorry to be the first one apparently to tell you. You are not the victim here. I fully understand it is legal to be a selfish prick and buy all the housing that you are able and rent it at the highest price possible. But come on, try to be a human. Now, there's obviously a big difference between a private landlord and a corporate or financial landlord. A private landlord is a homeowner who goes on to buy a second or third house, townhouse, condo, etc., in order to rent it out. They usually don't make too much money off the top. Something like 2.5% of their yearly net wealth can be attributed to their rental units. Whereas a corporate or financial landlord would buy complexes and buildings in large numbers, employ property managers, and make all of their income passively. However, in my humble opinion, there's no difference at the end of the day. A private landlord who isn't even making any real money off of their rental and is instead just hoarding housing by owning more than they need is just a gross show of selfishness. A corporate or financial landlord deserves to be eaten with the rich. Regardless, you either sold out or made it harder for a fellow human being to have one of the basic human rights, shelter. And at this point, that needs to be inexcusable. Being a landlord is not a job. It's not even considered an occupation in Canada or the USA, and does not show up by any statistics agencies as an occupation. Landlords, both large and small, are a drain on society. They do no work, provide no service because providing housing is not a service, and they commodify the labor of others for their own profits. Instead of the question always being, why do re-renters feel entitled to cheap housing? Why don't we instead ask, why do landlords feel entitled to 30% plus of our hard-earned take-home pay? And this isn't a question of free housing, because in a perfect world, nobody would pay for housing, landlords or tenants. This is a question of greed. If someone can get a mortgage for, say, $1,000 a month, why does that person feel entitled to charge more than that, plus maybe some maintenance fees to put towards repairs, whatever? The person who owns the extra house is already at an advantage for having the second home. Honestly, if this is you, ask yourself exactly why you feel entitled to any more than what you are owed or what you owe the bank. Kind of seems like a gross character trait to me. I'm going to wrap this up quickly today because it's Easter and I got started later. And also, this is going to be a topic that I'm going to touch on again and again and again. And I'm going to end up sounding like a broken record soon enough. One thing I want to end this with that's really stuck with me, though, is a tweet that said, "Why don't we treat housing like plates at supper? Nobody gets a second until everyone gets their first." And I think that's something that some people need to hear, maybe for their first time ever. As always, thank you for joining me today. I drop a new episode every Monday morning at midnight, so check back in next week to see what I'll be sharing with you then. Actually, what I'm going to be sharing with you then is the history of the KKK in Canada. I've been reading through a book and doing some research on it for the last couple weeks, which is why I've been doing a couple of these cop-out episodes. But I think it's going to be a good one, and it's going to be much longer. So I've been putting more towards that. So-called Canada is in a fentanyl and mental health crisis right now. Please consider picking up a free naloxone kit at your local pharmacy and do not use alone. For any Indigenous listeners out there, the Hope for Wellness helpline offers immediate, culturally aware, and trauma-informed help to all Indigenous people across Canada. It is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in English and French to offer immediate support and crisis intervention. While there are supports in Cree, Ojibwe, and Inuktitut, those are not available 24/7, so you may need to call in to find out the next time that a language speaker will be available. Call the toll-free helpline at 1-855-242-3310 or connect to the online chat at www.hopeforwellness.ca. And there is also the Thunderbird Wellness app that provides access to Indigenous perspectives on health and wellness, including substance abuse and mental health. Now, not that Indigenous people can't obviously use these next resources, but they do not advertise as culturally aware or trauma-informed. So basically, for everyone else, if you must use alone, please keep in mind that you can call 1-888-688-6677 to contact the National Overdose Response Services to access support while using, and especially using alone. And there is the Brave, BRAVE app, with a use alone timer that connects a paramedic with your location if you don't respond. For mental health support, you can contact 988 to get connected to a crisis responder. If you learned something new today, it'd be awesome if you'd click that button and follow along for next time. Or if you'd like to contact me with feedback, you can email me at oursharedpodcast@gmail.com. See you next time.